Welcome to Love Story with Lisa, where I share romantic audio stories. Today, I'll tell you a new love story. She swapped my exam paper, stole my life, and still dreamed of living the life I longed for. Don't even think about it. When I was in my senior year of high school, just before the art entrance exam, my parents passed away one after another in a tragic accident. I lived in a daze, forcing myself to survive day by day. It was only later that I discovered the truth. My art exam paper had been swapped. The one who impersonated me was my best friend, the school beauty, Dylan Sunday. Everyone said that my best friend Dylan's son was the moon high up in the sky. She won a gold medal in an international competition with just one painting, and at the same time captured the heart of the heir of the Chin family. Next month, she would become the future daughter-in-law of that prestigious family. But unfortunately, tonight, she would die in a fire, along with her entire family. That concludes the introduction. Now, please listen to the story. My name is Lena Lu. Lu as in dawn, Lena as in autumn. Everyone laughed at me, calling me a green leaf, a mere follower trailing behind Dylan Sunday. They all said I was nothing but mud under her feet. I failed the art exam. Both my parents were dead. I survived on just one steamed bun a day. Dylan's son was about to become the young madam of a wealthy family, while I was still cleaning up in an art studio, my face smeared with dirt, bowing my head and struggling just to make a living. Tonight, the fire that burned down Dylan's son's house was set by me. When the sound of police sirens pierced the night, I felt no regret, because everything that happened today had been calculated by me long ago. That painting, I was the one who painted it. She stole my art exam results, entered the school of my dreams, copied my painting to pass the exam and win the award. She stole my life. And she still wanted to live the life I had always dreamed of. Dylan's son, this world doesn't work that way. There are no such perfect fairy tales. When I received Dylan's son's call, I was staring blankly at the news online. Recently, a famous rising painter, Dylan's son, real name Dylan's son, won the gold award at the 27th Venice International Art Competition in 2022 with her work Moon in the Sky. She was a dazzling new star in the art world of our country. Mastershire once commented that she was a once-in-a-generation genius painter, overflowing with emotion. On the screen, Dylan's son wore exquisite makeup and a refined blue dress. She smiled radiantly as she accepted the host's interview. "Miss Sun," the host said, "this painting is titled Moon in the Sky. Many of your fans backstage say that you are the true moon in the sky, pure, bright, untouched by worldly dust." The comments section was flooded, so elegant and graceful. The bright moon in the sky. Fairy goddess, marry me. The painter is beautiful, the painting is beautiful, bringing glory to our country. Dylan's son smiled shyly. "It's only because of my fans' love." But my eyes were fixed firmly on the painting behind her, Moon in the Sky. Shock and disbelief surged through me. Impossible. How could this be? The host shifted her gaze to Dylan's son's dress. "Oh, right. I heard that the CEO of Vermilion Group has proposed to you. This dress is absolutely stunning." Vermilion Group, founded by the prestigious Chin family, one of the most influential families in Beijing. The companies under the group spanned entertainment media, information technology, and applied tech, every one of them immensely profitable. The young master of the Chin family, Ethan Chin, had just returned from overseas and taken over as CEO. All of this, I knew it by heart, because Dylan's son had shown off to me countless times. I watched the entire broadcast in a dazed state, until Dylan's son's call finally came through. "Lena Lu, what are you doing?" Dylan's son's voice sounded strange, hesitant. I lifted my head and looked at the children painting in the classroom. Nothing. Just working. Did you see today's hot search? What hot search? You know I don't follow the news. I don't even have money to buy a smartphone. I slowly handed the phone back to the child who was drawing. Oh. Right. She let out a breath of relief on the other end. I forgot. Then she continued, Lena Lo, I'm getting married next month in Santorini, to the CEO of Vermilion Group. Congratulations, I said calmly. So you're calling to ask me to be your bridesmaid? But I don't have money for a plane ticket. Of course not. Dylan's son suddenly shouted. I froze, realizing her reaction was inappropriate. She quickly softened her tone. I know. You're busy. You have to work part-time every day to make money. After the wedding, my whole family will move away and never come back. So my dad wants to invite you over for a meal tomorrow night. Are you free? I slowly lifted my head. I stayed frozen for a long time. Only when Dylan's son urged me again, did I finally come back to my senses. Tomorrow night, then. If we meet, we won't part without an ending. Under the scorching sun, I rode a shared bicycle to the art studio. My back was drenched in sweat, yet I didn't even feel the heat. I stared at the easel in front of me, covered with a white cloth. I lifted the cloth. As expected, nothing. The young assistant beside me peeked at me nervously, fear written all over his face. But I smiled. It took me a long time, before I finally found my voice. I see. I asked her where my painting was. She lowered her head and said nothing, stammering that she didn't know. I asked how much Dylan's son had paid her. The assistant stayed silent for a long time. Then suddenly, she said, I'm sorry. I found it ridiculous. Sorry? I said, if you know you were wrong, then why did you still do it? My mother was lying in the hospital. She needed a large sum of money for surgery. Sorry. I'm sorry, she said, but I really needed that money more than you did. Besides, even if you went to the exam, you might not have won anyway. She has the Chin family backing her. Everything was already decided. That didn't affect me in the slightest. I didn't even look at her. Not just this one, right? I asked calmly. There were other paintings you didn't give her? Or was there any you kept back? She fell completely silent. Your mother has already had several surgeries, I said. If you needed money, you could have said it directly. Why put on such a pitiful act, so miserable? Do you think that compares to me? My mother is already dead. My nose stung. Every time I thought of my parents, I wanted to cry. But I had to hold it in, at least not in front of a thief. I didn't know which wound I had touched. But suddenly she lifted her head and glared at me with hatred. There are no cameras. No evidence, she sneered. If you've got the guts, go report me. With that, she grabbed her handbag and walked away. I suddenly felt my whole body go limp. I collapsed onto the floor. My thoughts drifted back to how my parents had died, that year, when I was in 12th grade, right after the art exam results came out and I failed to get into university. My father became depressed. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He ran around everywhere, desperately trying to help me. In the end, while standing in front of the principal's office, he was so exhausted and anxious that his health gave out. He didn't see the road clearly, missed his footing, and was hit by a passing vehicle. He never stood up again. My mother, overwhelmed with worry, suffered a heart attack. Her condition relapsed, and she suddenly fell gravely ill. I sold everything of value in our house. I ran everywhere borrowing money. Relatives and family friends shut their doors and refused to see me. Only two people from high school, Lucas Lynn and Dylan's son, lent me some money, but it still wasn't enough. My mother didn't survive that winter. From that moment on, I regarded money as the most important thing in the world. I didn't dare buy anything. I squeezed every ounce of myself dry just to save money. But now, when I had finally saved enough to treat my mother, she was already gone. I began to wonder, what was the point of saving so much money? My parents would never come back. At 8 o'clock that evening, I arrived on time at Dylan's son's house and rang the doorbell. Her father, Victor's son, was the principal of our high school. Their family lived in a small villa on a hill in the suburbs. At the dinner table, I looked at Dylan's son's face, glowing with happiness. As if possessed, I suddenly asked, "Dylan, why didn't you marry Lucas Lynn?" The air at the table instantly froze. Lucas Lynn had been the school heartthrob back then, cold, aloof, like an untouchable idol. Dylan's son and I had both liked him in the past. Victor's son sneered with open contempt. A poor painter like him? Worthy of my daughter, how could he ever compare to the Cheen family? Dylan's son took a sip of wine. "Lena Lou, you still remember Lucas?" she asked. "You really are devoted." I lowered my head and laughed bitterly. Wasn't it because of him that I even took the art exam back then? Lucas? Dylan's son scoffed. "He's just good looking. Only young girls fall for that type." She hesitated slightly. If I had known back then that it was the Cheen family in Beijing, I would have given Lucas to you. Even now, it's not too late, as they fantasized about Dylan's son marrying into the Cheen family. I quietly stirred my soup. They talked so enthusiastically that no one noticed. I hadn't touched my food at all. I put my chopsticks down and spoke politely. "Dylan, Sunday, is this the moment when you feel the most hopeful and happiest in your entire life?" She was still lost in her future dreams. Of course, only her mother noticed something was wrong. She sniffed the air. "What's that smell?" "Something's burning." Dylan's son frowned. "I smell it too." "Mom, did you forget to turn off the stove?" She hadn't forgotten, I replied softly. "The house is on fire." The flames had already begun to spread. They tried to stand up, but couldn't move. Their bodies felt completely numb as they collapsed onto the floor. All they could do was watch me calmly walk into the kitchen, take out cooking oil, and slowly pour it over the door frames, the curtains, the tablecloth, anything that could burn. Dylan's son trembled, furious beyond measure. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed. "Are you insane, Lena Lou? What are you doing, insane?" I laughed softly. "But Dylan, you stole my life. 10 years ago, your father hired someone to swap our exam results. My painting was replaced with yours. How did it feel, impersonating someone else to get into university? Money is really powerful, isn't it? You can replace anyone's painting you want. 10 years ago, you stole my painting to get into college. These past years, you've used my paintings to compete, win awards, and promote yourself as a beautiful genius artist. Your parents are healthy. You have fame and fortune. Next month, you'll even marry into a powerful family. Your life these past years has really been wonderful, hasn't it?" Finally, I picked up a bottle of red wine and slowly poured it over them. I sighed. "But Dylan, my life hasn't been good at all. Not even a little. These past years, I've lived in a haze, alive, but worse than dead." I kicked Victor's son, who was lying beside me. "Principal's son," I said calmly, "you understand me, don't you?" But when he saw the madness and destruction in my eyes, he panicked, truly terrified. His body trembled as he reached out, trying to grab the hem of my pants. He burst into tears and begged me. He said, "Lena, please forgive me. Forgive Uncle Sunday. I only have one daughter. She knows she's not good at painting, that she couldn't pass the exam. She cried for nights on end. I truly couldn't bear to watch my daughter suffer like that. That's why, during the art exam, I bribed the admissions officer. Lena, please understand the heart of a father. I stayed silent. After a long while, I suddenly asked, then what about my father? What about my father? Back then, my father went everywhere begging for help. On the day he came to your house, he accidentally overheard you and the admissions teacher discussing how to swap my exam results. When he turned around, intending to report you, you stopped him. The two of you argued right there at the door. You pushed my father down the slope. You saw a car coming. So you deliberately pushed him at that exact moment, didn't you, Victor's son? You're Dylan's son's father. But does that mean my father wasn't my father, after that? I threw the lighter. The flames roared upward. Their screams and pleas for mercy only annoyed me. Sure enough, tragedy and joy in this world can never be shared. They were furious, terrified, and horrified. And I felt only ease and relief. Because I had waited for this day, for a very, very long time. The fire burned violently. I walked outside and sat down on the grass, the very place where my father had fallen years ago. I calculated the timing, the 2 anonymous complaint letters I had sent should be getting processed by now. One letter reported Dylan's son for swapping my exam results back then to get into university, dragging out an entire chain of scandals. The other letter was sent to the Art Association, accusing Dylan's son of stealing other people's paintings to cheat in competitions. I knew it would be extremely difficult to reopen the investigation into my father's car accident from years ago. So tonight, the contents of the voice recorder I carried would be released to the public. Before coming here, I had met a journalist friend. I gave him everything, the full story and all the evidence I had secretly copied over the years. The goal was this: tonight, after this deliberate arson and murder that would shock society, another news bomb would explode, for the first time. I owned a smartphone. I never imagined it would be under circumstances like this. I turned on the camera and calmly recorded my final story. I want all the paintings under the name of Dylan's son to undergo X-ray examination. The painting Moon in the Sky is mine. I wrote my last words beneath it long ago. I thanked everyone, pressed send, and uploaded the audio and video to multiple platforms. My final wish was fulfilled. After everything was prepared, I called the police and turned myself in. When the sound of fire engines echoed in the distance, I swallowed the poison I had prepared long ago. Ever since I found that admissions officer 5 years earlier, that was when I began planning this revenge banquet. Today, I wanted Dylan's son to fall from the highest peak. I wanted her to die, in utter disgrace. I wanted her family, even in death, to be cursed, spat on by thousands. Tomorrow would be start of autumn, and Lena Lo, this wicked person, would finally die before the dawn of autumn. But I did not regret it. I would never regret it. Later, when the X-ray results came out, every painting signed with Dylan's son's name had a glaring red inscription beneath it, written in marker, in 2012, Dylan's son swapped Lena Lee's exam paper. Victor's son killed my father. His daughter stole my paintings. Every single painting was the same, except Moon in the Sky. Beneath that one was my suicide note. Since my parents left me, there has been nowhere to return to. All my life, I drifted in confusion, never knowing where the shore was. In my midnight dreams, I regret only 2 things. I regret becoming an art student, and I regret befriending Dylan Sunday. I never expected to open my eyes again. It wasn't because medical staff saved me, but because my father's saliva splashed onto my face. You're studying art? Art for what? The teacher said you study well. If you prepare seriously, you can definitely get into a key university. I'm telling you, stop hanging around the art studio all day. I stared blankly, unable to react, only foolishly watching my father scold me while holding his rice bowl. Then my mother slapped the back of his head hard. Richard, oh, sorry, old Lou, she said, say less. The child has liked drawing since she was little. Don't you know that? Why can't you talk properly? Hey, don't hit me. That hurts. I stood there with my mouth open, dumbfounded, watching the middle-aged couple in front of me, arguing and yet somehow showing affection at the same time. Warmth filled my chest. Tears suddenly poured down. I won't study art anymore, I said. Only then did I realize I had returned to 12 years ago, back when I was in 10th grade. Back when my parents were still alive, my life had restarted, returning to a time filled with hope. After careful thought, I swore, in this life, I would never repeat the same mistakes. I returned to the classroom and vowed that in this life I would study hard, get into a good university, find a good job, and live happily with my parents for the rest of my life. As for fame and fortune, I had never cared much about them anyway. Fortunately, this time I returned, before Dylan's son ever discovered my talent for painting. This time, I promised my teachers and my parents that I would not become an art student, no matter how difficult math, physics, or chemistry might be. I would master them, because academic credentials are truly important. In my previous life, I had suffered far too much because I had no academic credentials. This time, I would study further, go to graduate school, take the civil service exams. That day, I was buried in math homework, struggling through problems from the 5-year, 3-year practice book. My head was aching from formulas I couldn't quite grasp when I suddenly heard a cold, lazy, carefree teenage voice greeting the class. Hey, everyone, I'm Ethan Sheen. I looked up. Standing there was a handsome boy with thick eyebrows, a high-bridged nose, and an earring. His whole body radiated arrogance and defiance, the kind that refused to submit to anyone. At first glance, you could tell, this was the type of troublemaker student who would give teachers headaches for 3 straight years. I simply couldn't connect the boy in front of me with that young, elegant CEO of Vermilion Group I remembered, the poised man in a tailored suit, or the refined, seductive figure in a black tuxedo with a swallowtail coat. Oh, so much time had passed, I had almost forgotten. Back then, when Ethan Sheen transferred to our school, he really was a spoiled young master like this. I couldn't help but laugh. I quickly turned to look at Dylan Sunday. She hadn't been streamed into the art class yet. Look at that, her future husband, the man she hadn't even married yet, whose entire family she would lose before stepping through the Sheen family's door. Dylan's son's reaction was calm. A flicker of surprise flashed through her eyes before she quickly turned to look out the window. Outside our classroom window was the art class. If I remembered correctly, that seat belonged to Lucas Lynn. Right, back then, there wasn't such a thing as a rogue male lead. Girls all liked the cold, aloof type, people like Lucas Lynn. I turned back and looked at Ethan Sheen again, feeling secretly satisfied. I didn't know what the future CEO Ethan Sheen would think if he ever learned that I had burned down the entire family of his would-be fiancée, whether he would harbor hatred so deep it reached his bones. But right now, oh dear, the woman he hadn't even had time to marry yet, didn't spare him a single glance. Ethan Sheen, the teacher said, second row on the right, Lena Lu, make room for the new student. The laughter in my throat died instantly. Damn it, how did I forget? Before the class streaming, Ethan Sheen and I had actually shared a desk for a short while. Just like back then, The young master Ethan Chin slung his backpack over his shoulder with unmistakable arrogance. Seeing me staring at him blankly, I didn't know what crossed his mind. But he suddenly curled his lips into a smug, conceited smile. "You're Lena Lu, right?" I was still dazed and only managed a quiet I never expected that brat to grin and deliver that classic opening line again. "Lena Lu. What kind of Lu is that? Did your parents like drinking autumn pear juice or something, so they named you that? Pears are supposed to be round and plump. You're kind of chubby too. You look a bit like a pear." The whole class burst out laughing, exactly the same as before. Back then, he had mocked my name like this too. He even teased me for being fat, but where was I fat? Wasn't I just a little soft? Was that my fault? Wasn't it because Mr. Lu cooked too well? That annoying little jerk, even in this life, he still managed to make my blood boil just like he did in my previous one. In my past life, Lena Lu had been timid and dared not say a word. But this life, Lena Lu had turned her fate around. Parents, tell me, how could I endure this? I slammed my hand on the desk and lunged forward, throwing a punch straight at him. One punch. He went down. Well done. My father jumped to his feet, clapping enthusiastically. My mother immediately smacked the back of his head. While my father whimpered, she lectured me sternly, telling me I shouldn't use violence against classmates. That I should get along with everyone. She said violence couldn't solve problems. And if I really had to fight, how could a small girl like me ever beat someone as tall and strong as Ethan Chin? Making enemies like that was never a good thing. The next day, she took me to apologize to Ethan Chin in the infirmary. Ethan Chin was having medicine applied to his chin, wincing in pain. The moment he saw me, his face darkened. He turned his back to me, pretending I didn't exist. I was no longer the weak, fragile girl I used to be. For 10 years, I had worn filthy clothes, been looked down upon, had bottles thrown at my face while scavenging. My skin had grown thick, and more importantly, I had thought it through. If I offended the future CEO Chin, then in the future, I really might end up picking up bottles just to survive. I hurried around to stand in front of him, straightened my posture, and prepared to speak. Ethan Chin let out an irritated snort. "What are you here for? Didn't get enough punches yesterday? Came to add another one to my left cheek today?" I pinched my arm hard, tears burst out instantly from the pain. "I'm sorry. Wah, I shouldn't have hit you. Wah, I was wrong. Wah," I cried with complete sincerity. My apology was utterly genuine. Ethan Chin panicked. Why are you crying?" He stumbled, knocking things over, scrambling to find tissues and shoving them into my hands. I took them, sobbing, wiping my tears while apologizing non-stop. Ethan Chin said awkwardly, "I'm not the type to argue with girls. Girls are really troublesome." He glanced at me and saw that I was still looking at him with tear-filled eyes. His expression changed. After a moment, he lowered his voice. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have teased you yesterday. Your name. I really said it wrong. My mom said so too. Actually, I don't hate pears, I kind of like eating them." "You're still talking, you still dare say more?" In the end, this small incident was resolved peacefully, after both of us were scolded harshly by the homeroom teacher. When I went back to doing my homework, Ethan Chin sat beside me, rubbing his chin. Every so often, he'd click his tongue softly in pain. "Check, you look pretty well behaved, but you really throw a heavy punch." I could also hear whispers spreading through the classroom. Why has Lena Lu become so violent lately? She even beat someone up. No one could have seen that coming before. Who would have thought she had that kind of nerve? Ethan Chin looks like a total delinquent. Isn't he afraid of revenge later? A girl that fierce. Who would dare marry her in the future? I set my pen down with a sharp clack. Ethan Chin froze. Then he heard my voice, soft, calm, almost amused. I'm not the Lena Lu you knew before, I said quietly. I'm Nyo Hulu Lena Lu now. What? Of course, he didn't understand. Empresses in the palace hadn't even aired yet. How could he? Where did that nerve come from? I smiled faintly. I've already died once, I said. What is there left for me to be afraid of? Besides, my parents are still alive. I've returned to the best time of my life, every single day. I'm so happy I could cry. I'm genuinely happy. I never expected Ethan to suddenly turn around, slam his pen onto the desk, and shout at the whispering students behind us, "It's self-study time." What are you whispering about? Shut up. Don't you know how to be quiet? No one dared to argue back, after all. He wasn't even a class monitor. It was the year 2008. The college entrance exam hadn't been reformed yet, but students were already divided into science and social sciences tracks. We were about to enter grade 11, and it was time to choose. I carefully considered which careers would be possible if I chose the social sciences track. In the end, I made my decision. I would study social sciences. Even now, my father still couldn't quite process my sudden maturity. What? You really want to study social sciences? I slung my backpack over my shoulder, stood in front of the mirror, and tied my hair into a high ponytail. Of course, I'm not good at math or physics anyway. I'm better at language arts. I memorize quickly. I retain things well. Social sciences suit me. Besides, I added casually, it'll be easier to get into graduate school or pass the civil service exams later. My father frowned, puzzled. But before this, didn't you say you didn't want to be a civil servant? You said you didn't like a life where everything was predictable. I smiled. In the future, the trend will be becoming a civil servant. I didn't know whether this parallel world would face a pandemic or not, but a government position was truly appealing. 9 to 5, clock out, go home, eat dinner with my parents. To me, that was the best life possible. Who says I need to move out and live on my own? I grinned, leaving my bewildered father standing there alone, then pedaled away on my old bicycle. Both of my parents were ordinary public sector workers. In my previous life, they had spent an enormous amount of money supporting my art studies. Studying fine arts was a bottomless pit. Our family had tightened their belts just to afford it. If not for that, when my mother's heart condition relapsed, we would have had money for treatment. That situation must never happen again. Every month, I coaxed my mother into going to the hospital for checkups. Luckily, the doctor said her condition was very good. She just needed to be careful. But there was one thing I hadn't expected. On the day I transferred to the social sciences class, I was arranging my desk, preparing to sit down, when a shadow suddenly appeared beside me. That person smiled, revealing 2 small dimples. Oh? What a coincidence. Desk mates again, huh? Lena Lu. Ethan Chin. He brushed the dust off his jacket and sat down beside me casually. What? Why do you look so surprised? But, I hesitated. Didn't you study science in my last life? Why didn't you go to the science class? Ethan stuffed his bag into the desk and dropped his textbooks onto the table. Act first, explain later. If I went to the science class, who would I copy notes from? The reason was absurdly simple, and painfully realistic. He pulled out 2 lollipops, handed one to me, then unwrapped the other and boldly popped it into his mouth right there in class. Social sciences, or science. It's all the same to me. Anyway, by grade 12, my family's sending me abroad. Right, in my previous life, Ethan also went overseas in grade 12. He wouldn't be staying long. The Chin family's young master, past life or present, wasn't much different. Every day, he fooled around, teased people, and skipped rules like they didn't exist. In class, he either worked on TOEFL or IELTS mock tests, or wore headphones and slept. After school, while his friends went out to play, he violated school rules about 800 times and settled everything with money. When bored, he'd wander over to the art class to flirt with the school beauty, Dylan Sunday, a truly rebellious rich kid. Who would have thought that 10 years later, he becomes someone reliable? Maybe studying abroad really did make him more serious. By the way, I asked, lifting my head from a pile of assignments. Why haven't you gone to the art class lately? You haven't seen Dylan's son in a long time. I added, I noticed you haven't been running over there either. They went out for training earlier, I said. Lucas Lynn borrowed my notes, so I had to go get them back before class. Ethan had been about to collapse onto the desk to sleep, but I seemed to have disturbed him. He muttered irritably, Then why haven't you gone to Lucas Lynn yourself lately? I see you running back and forth, it's annoying. So after school, I give him all my notes, I replied calmly. I take them back the next morning before class. Ethan let out a cold chuckle. Oh. Hardworking, huh? Just then, someone called out to me, Lena Lu, Lucas Lynn is looking for you. Ethan was wide awake now. He sat up straight. It was the 8th period. The sunset light draped softly over the boy's pristine white shirt. He was slender, yet stood tall, like a graceful bamboo stalk, refined and elegant. He looked as if he'd stepped out of a traditional ink painting. Lucas Lynn smiled gently at me and nodded in greeting. I hurriedly pulled the notebook from my bag and handed it to him. Teacher Zhang went over additional essay writing techniques for the college entrance exam today, I said softly. I wrote everything down. It's all here. The teenage boy took the notebook with both hands and smiled. Thanks, Lena Lu, he said softly. My mom made corn braised ribs today. I'll bring some over to your place tonight. Oh, I blinked. That's really too much trouble. Ethan Chin watched the two of us with a darkened expression. Oh? What kind of relationship is this, huh? Sharing food already? My desk mate, why didn't you tell me about this? Lucas Lynn froze, about to explain, but I cut in quickly. Our families live in the same apartment complex, I said calmly. We're neighbors. Our moms are pretty close. The only difference is, his place has 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, while my family only has 2 bedrooms and 1 living room. Tears nearly fell when Lucas Lynn finally left. A few girls in the class propped their chins on their hands, watching him go. Then they turned back to me, faces full of envy. Lena Lu, you're so lucky. What's there to be jealous of? I replied lightly. Ethan Chin snorted, then turned to look at me. Why did you lend him your notes? 1 notebook, I said evenly. 200 yuan. Ethan Chin fell silent. After a long moment, he cautiously raised 1 finger. So? You'd lend to me too? 100 won't be enough. All right then, he said generously. Since you're my desk mate, I'll give you a 50% discount. My mom looked at my report card a few days ago, he added seriously. She said we should eliminate relatives for the sake of justice. Did I mean? Ethan swallowed twice, clearly nervous. Are you free on weekends? Could you tutor me? There's money to be made, only an idiot wouldn't earn it. How much per hour? He asked quickly. I stared at the finger he was holding up. 1? I asked, seeing my expression shift slightly. Ethan panicked. Not enough? Wait, I immediately stopped this clueless rich young master. Let's go by market rates, I said firmly. Private tutoring is usually 100 to 150 yuan per hour. How much time can you spare on weekends? Ethan thought for a moment. I have other classes on weekends, he said, but I can squeeze out 2 hours each day. I calculated rapidly in my head. From now until he went abroad in grade 12. All right, I said decisively. I won't charge extra. 100 per hour on weekdays. Every school day, we add 1 extra hour after class. I'll find an empty classroom to tutor you. Weekends will be 150, because I already have a tight study schedule then. Ethan looked shocked, as if thinking, why is this so cheap? Meanwhile, I was over the moon. 5 weekdays, 5 hours, 500, weekends, 600, that's 1,100 a week, 4 weeks a month. 4,000 yuan, my God. I couldn't believe I could earn 4,000 yuan a month thanks to this rich desk mate. I immediately grabbed Ethan Chin's hand and said solemnly, desk mate. After school today, don't go anywhere. Both my parents agreed with me tutoring my desk mate, but I didn't dare tell them how much he was paying. I was afraid they'd be shocked and shut the deal down immediately. But once you take someone's money, you have to do the job properly. I found comprehensive practice exams to diagnose Ethan's weak points, and focused on patching the gaps I discovered. Honestly, Ethan Chin wasn't stupid. He just hadn't studied seriously before. Once he focused, he understood quickly. One time, he solved a difficult math problem using a completely different method, and got the correct answer. I compared his solution with the official answer again and again, and realized his approach was actually simpler than mine. I was teaching my student, but my student wasn't just keeping the teacher from starving, he was leveling the teacher up. As time passed, our math sessions became like this. I found problems. Ethan wrote the answers, then he explained his solution to me. And every time, I'd suddenly understand. Eventually, I refused to take tutoring money for math anymore. From now on, I told him seriously. I can't charge you for math tutoring. I still need to rely on you. Let's improve together. Ethan didn't argue. Fortunately, he was terrible at language arts and politics, so I could still charge for those. He had strong logical thinking. I had strong language intuition. Day by day, we complemented each other, progressing together, supporting one another. However, this student had one fatal flaw. He was easily distracted. That day, we were doing number sequence exercises. In an empty classroom on the 3rd floor, the problems were simple. Ethan finished quickly, then he propped his chin on his hand and stared at me, completely spacing out. His gaze made my skin crawl. Unable to stand it, I waved my hand in front of his face. Ethan. He suddenly grabbed my wrist. His palm was burning hot, so hot it felt like it scorched my skin. My wrist felt as if it were being seared. I froze, staring at him. The distance between us felt too close. That moment seemed to stretch on forever. It felt like the first time I truly looked at Ethan Chin's face. Deep eyes, handsome features. If Lucas Lin was gentle like water, the moon itself, then Ethan Chin was the sun, a light piercing through clouds, illuminating the darkness. He wasn't smiling right now, yet I could almost see his usual dimpled grin, like a small sun. Desk mate, I said stiffly. Using a joke from 10 years in the future, if you don't let go, that won't be very polite. Ethan froze, then hurriedly released my hand. He scratched his head awkwardly. clearly searching for words. I just wanted to say. Desk mate, you know. Lately, I don't need tutoring for as many subjects anymore. Should we increase your pay? What kind of person do you think I am? I shook my head firmly. No, absolutely not. Since you started tutoring me, he said earnestly, my grades have skyrocketed. I'm almost in the top 100 of the entire grade now. My mom even asked about your tutoring fees, and she said we should raise them. I still refused. No, I said firmly, we agreed on the amount. Whatever we agreed on, that's what it is. He was already paying a lot, yet the moment money came up, his eyes lit up. Ethan Chin frowned. I really don't understand why you keep refusing, he said. You clearly like money. Yes, I replied softly, lowering my head, I really like money. But that's because, I continued, you've never lived through days with no money at all. Ethan. I like money, but a decent person earns money the right way. And you really have to call me Ethan? He muttered, that sounds like something out of a textbook. I like calling you that, I said seriously, it's cute. Ethan. Ethan. These days, I poured all the energy I once spent grinding for money and experience points in my previous life into studying. I realized that many concepts I used to struggle with now felt surprisingly easy to grasp. Mr. Lewin Comrade oldly stared at me in disbelief, watching as I barely lifted my head from my books. In this life, I completely avoided Dylan Sunday. I stayed far away from the art class. Whenever I had time, I studied relentlessly. I couldn't afford to play around anymore. Now, I finally understood the beauty of learning. There are no shortcuts in life. In my previous life, I hadn't memorized the answers to the 2012 college entrance exam. And in this life, I didn't need heaven to send me back to that exam, so I could cheat or take shortcuts. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. What fate wanted wasn't clever tricks, it wanted me to work hard, stay focused, and keep moving forward. I didn't need to get into a top-tier university. I just wanted to study properly this time. To get into a good university. To make up for the regrets of my previous life. I wanted to strive for a brighter future, for myself, and for my parents. Because of tutoring, I had become familiar with Ethan Chin's home in City A. His parents were often abroad and rarely came home. The large villa was usually occupied by only one elderly housekeeper, who handled everything. That day, something unexpected happened during tutoring. Ethan received a phone call, an urgent matter. He told me to take a walk for a bit. If I'm not back by 5, he said, I'll arrange for someone to take you home. I couldn't sit still, so I wandered through the corridors, looking around. The housekeeper smiled warmly and followed beside me, introducing the decorations one by one, telling stories about Ethan when he was little. Eventually, we reached the 3rd floor. At the very end of the hallway, a door stood slightly ajar. I glanced inside, and unconsciously stopped. That's the painting room, the housekeeper said. The lady used it occasionally when she came, but it's been unused for a long time now. Miss Lena, would you like to go in and take a look? I had thought I'd already restrained my desire to paint. It had been a full year since I returned. I hadn't touched a brush or paint once. But today, the moment I saw them, my hands began to tremble. I sat in front of the easel, skillfully stretching the paper, washing the brushes, mixing colors, as if I had practiced this 10,000 times before. I stared at the blank sheet of paper, took a deep breath, and lifted the brush. I lost all sense of time. I painted guided purely by instinct. By memory embedded in my body, sketching, coloring, flowing naturally. Only painting could make me so completely absorbed. It allowed me to forget everything around me, to forget painful memories, to forget hatred. There was only quiet peace. Outside the window, the lights slowly changed. The colors on the canvas shifted with it. I didn't know how much time had passed. When I finally came back to myself, it felt like the first time I was seeing my own painting. All that remained was a deep tremor in my heart. The moon in the sky. I had drawn it again. Some subtle details were different, changes I hadn't consciously noticed. But overall, it was still the same painting. I didn't know why I had painted this. Why had I recreated the moon in the sky? Ethan Sheen stood behind me, leaning against the doorframe, watching intently. I didn't know how long he had been there. He was completely silent, not saying a word, just watching me paint. I turned my head. His gaze shifted from the canvas and settled on me. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "You should walk the path of an art student. You could get into the best art academy." That was what he said. I looked at him, and suddenly, tears streamed down my face. That day, Ethan Sheen drove me home. On the way, I cried non-stop, so hard I could barely breathe. I wanted to ask him so many things. I wanted to ask why he married Dylan Sunday. I wanted to say that the moon in the sky was painted by me. But I couldn't, because he didn't know about my previous life. I don't remember exactly what he said to comfort me. I only remember that he held me, and I completely broke down in his arms. So it turned out, too, could feel wronged. I felt wronged because Dylan's son had stolen my painting. The moon in the sky was never hers, the silhouette of a woman crying by the Atlantic Ocean. That was me. On what grounds did she claim the moon in the sky, then call me dirt beneath her feet? I felt wronged because my previous life had been filled with injustice, helplessness, pain, and tearing despair. When I finally calmed down and opened the door, I saw Mr. Lowe and Mrs. Lee standing there, faces stern. "Be honest," Mr. Lowe said. "You've fallen in love early, haven't you?" "And with which boy?" It was over. They had seen Ethan Sheen and me hugging downstairs. Mrs. Lee narrowed her sharp eyes. "Old Lowe," she said slowly, "this boy looks awfully familiar. Where have we met him before?" As always, when it came to reacting quickly, Mr. Lowe never disappointed. "Hey, wait, isn't that guy?" "Yeah. I think he looks exactly like Lena Lee's deskmate. Right? That has to be him." "Definitely. That kid. His last name is Sheen or something." As soon as they reached that conclusion, Mr. Lowe started rummaging around furiously. No one knew where he pulled it from, but suddenly there was a stick in his hand. "So this little punk dares to set his sights on my Lena? Just wait. I'll go beat him up right here at the school." In senior year already and still not studying properly, thinking about puppy love all day, blah blah blah. Mrs. Lee reacted quickly and grabbed him, whispering something in his ear. Then she turned to me with a smile. "Lena, tell him to come over for dinner tomorrow. Tonight, your dad will cook braised pork ribs." But somehow, that smile felt too gentle. And what really bothered me was, were we really having braised pork ribs? The next day at school, I couldn't help myself. I secretly glanced at Ethan again and again, hiding behind a book. I genuinely didn't know how to start the conversation with him. But I knew one thing. If I didn't invite him over, with Mr. Lee's personality, he might actually storm into the school. Ethan was working on a math problem. He seemed to sense something and suddenly turned his head. I panicked and looked away at once. A moment later, I sneaked another glance. Ethan tilted his head slightly, his back facing me. He looked completely focused on solving the problem, but his hand was gripping the back of his neck. On that pale skin near his ear, A flush of red suddenly spread. It was beautiful, so captivating it made me want to bite it, and then, smack, a piece of chalk hit me. Lena Lu, come up here and solve this problem. On the blackboard was a freshly drawn quadratic function problem by Mr. Zhang. Ethan was excellent at functions. We had solved a similar problem just yesterday, so I walked up confidently. Mr. Zhang frowned as he examined my solution. Smooth, clean, flawless, unable to find a mistake. He turned and asked, "Very well done. But do you know why I called you up here, Lena? Why do you keep staring at your desk mate during class?" The class, half asleep just seconds ago, instantly snapped awake. I looked at the rows of heads below me, eyes wide open, sparkling with curiosity. Because. I scratched my head, completely blank. Mr. Zhang glared at me. Left with no choice, I blurted out, "Because he's handsome." So I looked. "Oh shh!" The class erupted. Ethan instantly raised a hand to cover his face. Thunderous applause broke out. Mr. Zhang slammed the desk. "Enough. No laughing. Focus on the lesson." But he couldn't stop the cheers and laughter. High school was an era of suffocating pressure, endless test papers piled up like mountains. Strict rules, nothing allowed except studying. All emotions outside of academics were labeled improper. And yet, those reckless passions and bold confessions of youth were like the brightest, heaviest stroke of color, etched deeply into our high school years, across both my past life and this one combined. This was the first time I had ever received such roaring applause. At first, Mr. Zhang tried to stop it. Later, he leaned against the blackboard, looking at us, a bunch of kids like beans, and laughed helplessly. Then he waved me down. I heard him mutter, "If it weren't for the fact that both of you have improved in math lately, I wouldn't have let this slide so easily." I grinned and ran back to my seat. After school, I hesitated, unsure how to talk to Ethan. But the bell had barely finished ringing when he vanished, gone without a trace. The girls behind me started teasing. "Hey, did you scare Ethan away? Did you see Mr. Zhang's face? He's the most old-fashioned teacher ever. You're really brave." So what if he's handsome? People aren't even allowed to say it now? On the rooftop, a boy in a white shirt stood tall and straight like a green pine. His expression was calm, fingers flipping through a book. The rooftop door suddenly slammed open. A figure rushed out. Ethan gripped the railing with both hands, bent over, gasping for air. Then his legs gave out, and he slid to the ground, burying his head in his knees, face burning red. Lucas Lin stood there, stunned. "Classmate, are you okay? Do you need help? Should I call 120? Ethan lifted his head. Lucas froze. "Did you get heatstroke?" Then Ethan burst out with a curse. "Why you, what are you doing here?" Lucas raised his hands innocently. "Isn't this where people hide from Dylan's son?" Lucas had heard about Ethan's reputation, the notorious tyrant of school number 2, more than once. That unruly, untamable boy was now red with embarrassment, like a ferocious wild beast. Rarely exposing its soft underbelly, the beast stiffened, awkward yet still arrogant, chin lifted. "Lena Lu confessed to me." After Ethan left, Lucas silently pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Uncle Lu? Lena Lu is dating early." When Ethan walked into the classroom later, face expressionless, just as he was about to sit down, I seized the moment. "My mom said you should come over for dinner tonight." Bang! A chair fell over. That entire day, Ethan was unusually tense. 3 English questions wrong, a calculation mistake in physics. His mind was clearly elsewhere. It couldn't be that bad, right? I had only teased him a little during math class. But after school, he rushed off again, even skipped tutoring that evening. On the way home, Lucas, who rarely walked with me, seriously recited the school rules to me from start to finish, emphasizing, again and again, the ban on early relationships. He looked straight ahead, but his words were for me. Lena, Ethan Chin isn't someone we can get involved with. Do you know who he really is? My smile slowly faded. Lucas Lin sighed softly. Lena. We've been learning to draw together since we were kids. I'm an only child. I've always treated you like my own little sister. Otherwise, I wouldn't say things like this. Things that are bound to make people dislike me. He looked straight at me. Do you know the Chin family is preparing to send Ethan abroad? If he leaves, he'll be gone for many years. Do you really think you and him can? Don't sink too deep, Lena. I know, I said quietly. I've always known. I shouldn't have let myself fantasize in the first place. While I was drowning in my own negative emotions, a beautiful girl with long, flowing hair walked up beside Lucas. She looked at me with open scrutiny. It was Dylan's Sunday. My gaze turned icy in an instant. This time, she didn't recognize me. She only looked at me the way a beautiful girl evaluates an ordinary one. Ah. Tam, she said softly. Who is she? In my previous life, it was the same. She was always lofty and superior, yet pretended to be gentle, never openly belittling anyone. I clenched my hands. Back then, she had held my hand and said with a smile, the new CEO of the Chin Group has proposed to me. I'll become Mrs. Chin. You'll be happy for me, right, Lena? Happy. That day, I had set the fire. I made sure everyone died together. I erased everything. So in this life, I didn't want to pay her any attention. As long as she didn't provoke me, I wouldn't go looking for trouble. She thought I had forgotten. But I remembered everything perfectly clearly. My former desk mate, before I transferred classes, was named Ethan Chin. To this day, I still wondered why she never dared tell me that the man she was about to marry was Ethan. I answered immediately, I'm his younger sister. Then I shoved Lucas Lin, who was shooting me a desperate, pleading look, and turned around, walking home alone. I just couldn't understand. In my previous life, Ethan had gone abroad for so many years before returning, yet he still remembered his first love so vividly, that he even proposed to her. I had burned to death the woman he loved most, his fiancée. I didn't know whether he hated me so deeply that he hired Taoist priests to curse me, preventing my soul from ever finding peace. In my previous life, I liked Lucas Lin, but that was admiration born from familiarity. As for switching to fine arts, it was largely because I genuinely loved it. But Ethan Chin, I asked myself again, what about Ethan? He didn't even dare come to my house for dinner. He ran away in the middle of the night. Maybe I was overthinking everything. What's wrong with you, Lena Lu? Why are you being so greedy, daydreaming in broad daylight? Do you really want to rely on the Chin family to become some rich madam and live a life of luxury? Ordinary people should just study hard, get into college, go to graduate school, take civil service exams. That's the proper path. If there's no man in your heart, even holding a blade, you can become a god. But then, why was Dylan's son able to be with Ethan? Damn it, damn it, damn it. I was just about to tell my mother that Ethan wasn't coming after all, when the doorbell rang suddenly. Mr. Le dropped the spatula and rushed to open the door. My father froze. My mother, puzzled, asked, "What is it?" and followed him. The two of them turned into stone on the spot. Standing outside was a tall young man with long legs, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. He had tidied his hair, slicked down the usually messy strands neatly. Behind Ethan stood the elderly butler, along with several men in suits, each carrying gift boxes. They stood about 2 meters back. My parents stared at Ethan, standing stiffly upright, and at the gift boxes that nearly filled the first-floor hallway. Both of them were stunned. Later, Mr. Le told people that at that moment, he was terrified. He thought Ethan had come to propose. Ethan himself was clearly nervous too. He bowed properly. "Hello, uncle." "Hello." That only made my father more alarmed. Mr. Le said awkwardly, "If you're just here for dinner, then eat. Why bring so many things? For small-town ordinary folks like us." We had never seen such a grand scene in our entire lives. I was just as dazed, while the butler and my father were locked in a tug-of-war. "Please accept them." "No, no, take them back. Miss Lena has worked so hard tutoring our young master. We really can't accept this. It's the lady of the house's wish. It's just a token of appreciation." I quickly pulled Ethan aside. Why are you dressed like this?" "Why you?" Ethan immediately adjusted his collar nervously. "Isn't it okay? I thought meeting Uncle for the first time, I should dress more formally." The way he looked at me, like a child who'd done something wrong, only made me more flustered. I shook my head quickly. "No, that's not what I meant. It's good, really good." No, wait, not good, it's very good. Handsome. Very handsome. Really, really handsome. What was I even saying?" Ethan's eyes lit up instantly. He widened them slightly. In those eyes, it was as if an entire galaxy had burst into light. I froze. Even his shy, evasive gaze became secondary. I suddenly remembered, in my previous life, when I chased after Lucas Lynn, I had never once seen eyes this beautiful. They sparkled like a brilliant Milky Way, and they were looking at me. Only at me. I remembered hiding behind a door, secretly. Watching Dylan's son, watching that familiar yet distant CEO Chin. Those cold, indifferent eyes, that I could never reconcile with the ones before me now. As I stared into Ethan's eyes, I didn't notice that the boy's pale face was gradually heating up. He was just about to reach out, when my father cut in abruptly. Hey, what are you two doing there?" My father frowned at me. I could tell, if there weren't outsiders present, he would have already started scolding. "You two, go wash your hands and come eat." I had a strange feeling. It was as if my parents had planned a hangmen banquet, a polite dinner with hidden intentions. But Ethan Chin's sudden appearance had clearly thrown them off balance. Mr. Le couldn't bring himself to refuse outright. The butler ended up leaving a few of the gifts behind, and only then did everyone sit down at the table, my father looking visibly dejected. Mrs. Lee, on the other hand, was all warmth. She kept urging Ethan to eat. After Ethan praised her signature dishes, he added casually that his own parents had never cooked for him. There was admiration in his voice, and a faint sadness in his eyes. For some reason, that look struck straight into my mother's deeply maternal heart. I watched as she picked up food with the communal chopsticks and placed it directly into Ethan's bowl. Ethan smiled brightly at the bowl now piled high with food. "Mom, seriously, is there some kind of supernatural ability where I am actually the biological son, and he's the daughter?" Mr. Le clenched his hand into a fist and cleared his throat lightly. It seemed my father had finally remembered the script. He shot an unhappy glance at my mother, who was clearly being completely charmed by Ethan, and then got straight to the point. "Ahem. Ethan, Lena has already told me. Her math scores have improved so much. It's all thanks to you. I really want to thank you. Then my father lifted his teacup. You two are still minors. He emphasized the word still minors heavily. Good kids don't drink alcohol. Today, we'll use fruit juice instead. Ethan immediately lifted his cup as well, reacting quickly. No, no, no. If it weren't for Lena helping me review, my grades wouldn't have improved at all. Uncle, you're praising me too much. My father looked extremely satisfied. That's right. You two should learn from each other and improve together. You're about to enter grade 12. At this stage, you must focus even more. No distractions. Study hard. I know you're both good kids. You won't make the adults worry. Next year, you must work hard and get into good universities. I understood. My father was delivering a warning. He hadn't said anything outright. But every word carried implication. Ethan froze for a moment, then smiled seriously and replied, Yes, Uncle Lo, right now, the most important goal for Lena and me is getting into university. We'll do our best. You don't need to worry. My father was mostly satisfied, but when he heard words like we and together, he was still a little displeased. After dinner, my father called Ethan aside for a private talk. I didn't know what they discussed, but when my father came out with a noticeably relaxed expression, my curiosity only deepened. When seeing Ethan off, both Mr. Lo and Mrs. Lee stood beside him. My mother even held Ethan's hand, warmly telling him to come over for dinner often. My father patted him on the shoulder. Young man, your future is wide open. Work hard. Lena, go see your friend off. No need, Uncle, Ethan said quickly. It's not very safe for a girl to walk alone at night. My family is waiting downstairs. Really, no need to walk me out. Before leaving, Ethan turned back and stole a glance at me. Then he smiled, revealing a small dimple. The next day, Ethan Sheen took half a day off. I heard his mother had returned home and there was something that needed handling. I sat gloomily at my desk, my fingers itching. I picked up a marker and absent-mindedly sketched a few lines in my notebook. By the time I realized it, a familiar face had appeared on the page. The classmate sitting behind me immediately leaned over and snatched the drawing. You drew Ethan Sheen, didn't you? And you still say there's nothing between you two? Nothing at all? Why else would you draw his portrait? I immediately grabbed it back, covering it with my hand and denying everything. What nonsense. I was just bored, so I drew something. The short-haired girl with glasses behind me laughed slyly. The whole class is gossiping about you two now. Even if he's not as famous as Lucas Lin, Ethan is really handsome too. And those guys who blush easily. Super cute. I instantly got angry. Who said he's not as handsome as Lucas Lin? What are you all even looking at? Give me a break. In a few years, Ethan Sheen's type will totally make everyone fall for him. Just wait and see. But then, why does he become such a cold, aloof CEO in the future? He's clearly so lively right now. The girl behind me clicked her tongue. Look at you, confessing already. Oh, right, we even came up with a couple name for you too. What do you think about Dawn CP? Mr. and Mrs. Dawn works too. Back in 2008, that Korean show We Got Married caused a huge craze. Couple name shipping has been trending ever since. She really was the ultimate internet addict, always ahead of the times. She was the very first person to pair Ethan and me together and force everyone to ship us. I immediately grabbed her arm and begged her to drop the idea. If you don't, the whole class will start calling us that tomorrow. This is way too embarrassing. I don't even care about saving face anymore. Our homeroom teacher will definitely call me in for a talk. She just laughed brightly and ran off, and I stood there, utterly mortified, not even daring to imagine what Ethan's expression would be when he heard about this in the afternoon. Wait, why hasn't he come back yet? School isn't even over. When I was riding my old, creaky bike home, I ran into someone, Dylan's son. She had transferred to the art class long ago. Thanks to her father, Principal Victor's son, she had successfully ended up in the same class as Lucas Lynn. Just like in my previous life. The only difference was that the person walking beside her was a different girl. That girl wore glasses, looked pale and delicate. It was Nina Sue. In my previous life, Nina Sue had also been in the same art class as me. She painted beautifully, especially still life. If I remembered correctly, she had been admitted to the Lu Sun Academy of Fine Arts. Watching Dylan's son tug Nina Sue along so intimately. A sudden sense of unease crept into my heart. In this life, I was no longer studying fine arts. So would that father and daughter finally give up on their plan to switch someone else's exam paper? I never expected their target to be Nina Sue. I cursed under my breath. The online college admissions system had officially been implemented nationwide since 2001. In recent years, cheating in standard academic exams had become extremely difficult. But fine arts exams were different, back in an era when surveillance cameras were not yet fully widespread, when AI systems and information technology had not been commonly used to monitor examinations. Provincial fine arts exams, whether joint exams or independent ones, still had many points where human interference was possible. All the way home, I hesitated. Should I really meddle in someone else's business? I had once been soaked by the rain. I could not bear to watch others walk freely under clear skies. I wanted to break the umbrella sheltering someone else. That afternoon, after school, I stopped Nina Sue. Be careful of Dylan's son during the exam, I said. Be a bit more alert. Pay attention. If there's a proctor staring at your paper for too long, watch out. She might switch your exam paper. Nina Sue had a soft, gentle voice. Perhaps I frightened her. She shrank back slightly and asked timidly, why would they switch papers? Switch it with whom? I looked at this fragile girl, the type who would surely be bullied and yet never dare to speak up. Just imagining the future, Dylan's son swapping her paper, getting into Lu Sun Academy of Fine Arts, while Nina Sue cried helplessly. I felt my irritation surge. In all the lives I had lived, was I really going to let more victims suffer the same fate? I said, you need to be careful. Whoever they get angry at, that's the person they'll switch papers for. Just be more cautious. That's all I can say. Try to keep some distance from her. Nina Sue nodded obediently. All right, Lena. Still uneasy, I hurried to find Lucas Lynn and warned him to be extra vigilant as well. Better to be prepared in advance. I hoped it would help. At present, I simply didn't have the ability to confront Dylan's son and her father directly. All I could do was warn others to stay alert, but unfortunately, Dylan's son had already set her sights on Nina Sue. On the Friday before the final exams, during the parent-teacher meeting, I met Mrs. Cheen, Ethan Cheen's mother. As rumored, she was elegant and refined. Mrs. Lee volunteered to attend the meeting on my behalf because my exam scores had improved significantly. Thanks to my strong memory and Ethan's help with the science subjects, I had ranked within the top 50 of the grade. Number 2 high school was one of the city's most prestigious schools. with an enormous student population. Making it into the top 50 practically guaranteed admission to a good university. In the past, I wouldn't have dared to dream of this. In my previous life, my scores had only been enough to barely scrape into a first-year university, and that was after my homeroom teacher had spoken favorably to my father, convincing him to let me stay. She had said that if I worked hard, I might get into a 211 university, but even among first-year universities, there were clear differences between good and bad ones. Back then, the homeroom teacher's words had been little more than polite encouragement. And yet now, I actually had the potential to aim for a top-tier university. The new homeroom teacher even hoped I could be admitted to a Project 985 university. Had the teachers overestimated me? Project 985 universities were institutions included in China's Project 985, an initiative launched by the Chinese government in May 1998. Its goal was to build and develop world-class universities. The initiative was announced by former President Jiang Zemin during the 100th anniversary celebration of Peking University. Intended to elevate Chinese higher education to global standards. My goodness, in my previous life, I had never even stepped through the gates of a university campus. Just thinking about it now made me feel giddy with happiness. The parent-teacher meeting itself was nothing special. The teachers focused on encouragement, repeatedly praising Ethan and me. They didn't mention the rumors of early romance at all. Instead, they used us as examples to motivate other students, urging everyone to keep studying hard and not slack off. People really can keep improving, you know. You ask how I knew? I had been eavesdropping by the back door. Ethan stood beside me, rubbing his forehead. "You're way too obvious," he said. "The homeroom teacher can see you." The meeting was about to end. He grabbed my hand and pulled me away. We had barely taken a few steps when a clear, gentle voice called out behind us, "Min Min." Ethan instinctively tightened his grip on my hand. He turned around in surprise. Not far away stood a woman in a long linen dress. It was the first time I had ever seen someone wear linen so beautifully, so softly. She wore a fisherman-style hat and light-tinted sunglasses. The linen fabric made her look effortlessly gentle and serene. Walking in high heels, she moved with a graceful lightness, like a fish gliding through water, as she approached us. "Min Min," she said warmly, "why don't you introduce your mom to your friend?" Without waiting for Ethan to answer, she calmly removed her sunglasses and looked at me. So pretty. I froze, staring at her face. Before I could think, the words slipped out of my mouth. Mrs. Chin smiled, covering her lips, then laughed, her laughter clear and bright, like the ringing of silver bells. "So that's how it is. Your deskmate's son is quite an interesting child." Mrs. Chin smiled softly as she looked at me. Her tone was sweet, pleasant to the ear. Ethan let out a long breath of relief. "You're Lena Lu, right?" Mrs. Chin asked. When I heard that, I thought she would continue with something like, "I often hear my son mention you," or "Thank you for helping my son with his studies." But instead, the first thing she mentioned was the moon in the sky. This painting, I had left it at Ethan's house last time. On weekends, I occasionally went over to paint, but even now, it was still unfinished. "Min Min said you painted it at first, and I didn't believe him," Mrs. Chin said calmly. "But after looking closely, there are traces of a master's style hidden beneath the simplicity." Her face looked gentle, almost tender. Yet when her gaze settled on someone, it made them uncomfortable, as if she could see straight through them. "You're still so young, and yet you can already create a piece like this," she continued. "Have you ever considered studying at the Paris Academy of Fine Arts for advanced training?" I froze, then shook my head instinctively. No. I'm not studying fine arts. I want to. I want to become a civil servant, so I can stay close to my parents. Mrs. Cheen looked slightly surprised. She glanced at me again, a hint of disappointment flickering in her eyes. Little Lena Lu, you're quite attached to your family, she said. But being a civil servant, there's no creativity in that kind of work. Mrs. Cheen immediately stopped herself, as if realizing she had said too much, and smoothly changed the subject. Oh, right, I remember now. Min Min's exam scores have improved this time. He's entered the top 100 of the grade. Before, he refused to study, but recently he hasn't been fighting or skipping classes anymore. She smiled. It's all thanks to you. As she spoke, she bent down and rummaged through her bag. For helping my son behave and study properly, this tutoring fee is really too little. Take it, child. Consider it a token of thanks from his father and me. A red envelope, clearly prepared in advance, appeared in front of me. I felt extremely awkward. Seeing her hand me the red envelope made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't explain. The gesture felt strangely familiar, like a superior distributing bonuses to an employee. That moment made me feel unsettled. Almost reflexively, I waved my hands and stepped back. Auntie, there's really no need. I've already received enough tutoring fees. And Ethan has helped me a lot with the science subjects as well. I really can't accept this money. Thank you, Auntie. Ethan quickly pulled his mother back. Mom. Mrs. Cheen looked at her son, then slowly put the red envelope away. All right then. I still have things to attend to. I'll be leaving first. Min Min, come home early today. Your father will be back tonight. After she left, Ethan looked at me apologetically. My mom is always like this. Don't take it to heart. She's a bit. I smiled at him. I know. Auntie is actually very nice, and easy to get along with. Seeing that I didn't look bothered at all, Ethan finally relaxed and followed his mother. Mom, why did you give Lena Lu a red envelope? Ethan asked as they walked. She's my friend, not Dad's employee or your assistant. Mrs. Cheen walked slowly, her expression unchanged. Min Min, she said calmly, you already know why your father is coming back tonight, don't you? This summer will pass, and you'll enter your senior year. Your overseas studies have already been arranged by your father. Ethan stopped in his tracks. I don't want to go. Tell Dad, I'm not going. The housekeeper had just walked over when he saw Mrs. Cheen watching her son run away in anger. Truly rebellious, she muttered. Everything was fine, and now he suddenly doesn't want to go. There must be a problem. Mrs. Cheen sighed softly. The housekeeper, worried, looked in the direction where the young master had disappeared, then opened the car door. Madam, did you meet Miss Lena Lu? I did, Mrs. Cheen replied as she got into the car, lost in thought. How should I put it? She's not quite what I imagined, but in some ways, she is. The housekeeper didn't understand, but still praised politely. As expected, Madam understands art better than anyone. But in what way are they similar? Mrs. Cheen nodded slightly. There's a very deep sorrow clinging to that girl. From the moment I met Mrs. Cheen, an inexplicable sense of unease began to grow inside me. She radiated a powerful sense of artistry, but that artistic aura only made me think of painting. And then, inevitably, of my previous life, filled with despair, poverty, being driven into a corner with no way out. The moon in the sky was the peak of that despair. Now I finally understood why so many genius painters lived miserable lives and only became famous after death. Since my rebirth, I had not dared to touch anything related to art. I no longer visited galleries. I rarely met Lucas Lynn, and I always kept my distance from Dylan Sunday, because the painting talent I once took pride in was the fuse that ignited my tragic life. I would rather live an ordinary, stable life. After the final exams, Mrs. Cheen had someone send the moon in the sky back to me. The last time I painted it was a long, long time ago. Now, I was living so happily that I didn't dare touch that painting again. That painting was closely tied to my death in my previous life. It contained the greatest despair and pain I had ever endured. Now, just looking at it filled me with fear. I found a piece of cloth and covered it up. After the final exams, Ethan almost disappeared. Our tutoring sessions were temporarily suspended. I messaged him, but it took a long time before he replied, only saying that everything was fine, that there were family matters. But this couldn't go on forever. Text messages cost money. Worried that something had happened to him, I went to his house to look for him. But inside the villa, only the domestic staff remained, quietly cleaning. The housekeeper and Ethan Cheen were both gone. The anxiety in my chest grew heavier by the minute. Even though Ethan had said his family had gone back to Beijing for the holidays, I was afraid he would leave quietly, without saying a single word. Afraid that he would disappear from my life just like that. I began to worry whether his family was forcing him to study abroad after all. Ethan always avoided this question. He said he wouldn't go, but he never explained why he had left, nor did he say when he would return. In class, I started losing focus. I knew, deep down, that I was terrified in a way I couldn't explain. Inside my head, a voice kept echoing over and over again, "Lena Lu, the future can't be changed. Ethan Cheen will leave eventually. When that happens, will your parents really be able to live well?" The butterfly effect. That night, I tossed and turned until dawn, not daring to close my eyes. For several nights in a row, every time I fell asleep, I dreamed of the same scene. A rainy night. I knelt in front of my father's coffin, crying hysterically, refusing to let them bury him. My mother collapsed beside the casket, unable to stand. I clenched my teeth and handled my father's funeral arrangements, then poured all my remaining strength into taking care of my mother. Darkness swallowed every day. Hospital bills poured out like water, draining our savings bit by bit. When my mother saw the enormous cost of surgery, she could barely speak, but she still told me to stop. Don't treat me anymore. Don't waste the money. It won't work. If I die, how will you ever pay back such a debt? I refused to listen. I knelt in front of doctors and nurses, begged relatives, only to be rejected one after another. I even thought about loan sharks, but my mother didn't want me to suffer. By the time I finally scraped together the money and rushed to the hospital before the deadline the doctor had given, she had already stopped breathing. The following night, I dreamed I was in the fine arts examination hall. I was painting, but suddenly, the painting in front of me turned into something crude, ugly, deliberately bad. I had never seen it before, yet I knew instantly. It was Dylan's son's painting. I jolted awake. The night after that, I dreamed I was in my 20s. I dragged my exhausted body down the street, having just finished my third part-time job of the day. Suddenly, I leaned against a trash bin, covering my mouth, as violent coughing tore through me. When I lowered my hand, I saw streaks of blood in my palm. Then my legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the road. Red blood dripped onto red paint, dazed. I wiped the blood flowing from my nose, my head spinning. I picked up a brush and wrote in red letters across several canvases. A few days earlier, I had seen the gallery assistant accepting money from Dylan's Sunday. After that, I deliberately placed my finished works in the most visible spot. To make it easier for them, I kept painting, over and over again, just so Dylan's son could submit the works under her own name. The exhaustion made me nauseous. On the fourth night, the moon in the sky was finally completed, but just as I lit the fire, a group of armed police stormed into Dylan's son's villa. They pinned me to the ground. I stared blankly as a familiar figure walked toward me from behind. A black coat. It was Ethan Sheen. 10 years later. He looked down at me from above, his gaze icy and distant. Dylan's son stepped in front of me and squatted down. Her face was both beautiful and vicious. She lifted my chin and whispered each word clearly. Lena Lo, did you really think you were the only one who came back to life? Thank you for your paintings. They helped bring Ethan Sheen to my side. After all, we were once such good friends. The special police will even allow you to attend our wedding before you go to prison. Doesn't that make you happy? My eyes burned red with rage. Pain pierced straight through my heart and bones. I hated her. I wanted to tear her into 1,000 pieces. I wanted to drag her down with me into destruction. When I opened my eyes, my back was soaked in sweat. Those days, the nightmares clung to me relentlessly. Scenes from my previous life replayed again and again, trapped in an endless loop. Every time I woke up from a dream, I fell out of bed, crawled to my feet, grabbed a brush, and tore the cloth off the canvas, late every night. When my nerves were stretched to their breaking point, under extreme mental pressure, I painted the moon in the sky like a madwoman. I didn't even know why. I only knew that doing so made me feel slightly less suffocated. Mrs. Lee saw me stumbling out of my room every day, pale, hollow-eyed, dark circles heavy beneath my eyes. She thought something had possessed me and nearly went to find a Taoist priest to perform an exorcism. I poured every ounce of strength I had into painting for several nights in a row. The process of creating the moon in the sky was agonizing. Only when I woke from nightmares in the dead of night could I continue. When I finally completed the last stroke, I suddenly felt as if a massive weight had been lifted. That night, I slept without dreams, strangely enough, after finishing the moon. In the sky, the nightmares stopped. The pain that had haunted me faded away. That evening, I went for a walk downstairs with Thursday Daizhuang and Mrs. Lee. Under an orange streetlight, Ethan Sheen stood there. He looked at me, deeply. Later, Mrs. Lee said that when I saw Ethan, my eyes instantly lit up. I said something to them and ran toward him. When I reached him, there were so many things I wanted to say, but standing in front of him, my eyes slowly grew hot. I smiled and said softly, "Ethan, why have you gotten so thin?" Ethan instinctively lifted his hand, then, forcing himself to stop, he lowered it again. He really had grown thin, much thinner than before. He stood there looking weathered and exhausted, as if he had rushed here overnight without a moment of rest. There was a faint scent of haste clinging to him, the smell of a long, urgent journey. My instincts told me something had happened. Otherwise, Ethan Sheen would never have lost so much weight in just a few days. His back was slightly hunched. I didn't dare imagine what hardships he had gone through. But the very moment he saw me, Ethan's first reaction was to smile. That familiar smile, showing his small fang. He didn't answer my question. Instead, his eyes curved as he smiled and asked me, "Desk mate, haven't you gotten thinner too?" Not far away, I saw the elderly housekeeper and a group of bodyguards I had never seen before. Ethan's state didn't look like someone returning in victory. His sudden appearance that evening felt more like a final visit, to see me one last time. I knew he couldn't fight against his family. In my previous life, it was only years later that I learned about his family background, a height so unreachable that even if I lived 8 lifetimes, I wouldn't dare dream of it. Ever since meeting Mrs. Cheen, I had already understood the family's stance. I had almost completely given up that last shred of illusion. How could he possibly stand against his father? And yet, this boy, the boy standing in front of me, on a July night, wrapped in thick darkness, he came to see me like a lone hero. The next day, when I went to Ethan Cheen's house, it was the elderly housekeeper who received me. The young master is still catching up on sleep, he said. The moment the master gave permission, he came straight back without resting at all. I took the cup of tea handed to me. The old housekeeper clearly had many things he wanted to say, yet he hesitated, weighing his words. After a moment's thought, he decided to remain silent. I held the teacup restlessly. For a long time, no one spoke. The silence felt heavy. Finally, the old man across from me spoke slowly. I raised the young master myself, he said. To be honest, even the master and madam don't understand his temperament as well as I do. Miss Lena, the Cheen family's empire is far larger than you could ever imagine. The master and madam have only one child. Because of that, the burden on the young master's shoulders is something you can't possibly foresee. In his previous schools, the young master beat up the sons of this CEO and that chairman. At school, relying on his family background, he lived recklessly, arrogant, fearless, acting as if no one mattered. That was why the master became furious and sent him here. He heard that No. 2 high school had a strong academic atmosphere, hoping it would temper the young master's wildness. No wonder, when Ethan Cheen first arrived, he really did look like someone who deserved a beating, so he used to be a little tyrant. But suddenly, the old housekeeper's tone changed. His voice softened, however. I know very well that the young master was never truly rebellious. He only used that behavior to attract his parents' attention. He never wanted to come here to study in the first place. The pressure of the environment didn't suit him. When he first arrived, he complained every single day, hoping the master would send him abroad to study as soon as possible. But gradually, he stopped mentioning it. Instead, he began telling me about his desk mate, the girl who punched him on his very first day of school. As the housekeeper spoke, a trace of a smile lit up his eyes. Embarrassed, I lowered my head. So he had known about me for a long time. Yes, the old man chuckled. After all, there aren't many people who dare to hit the young master. The young master said his desk mate studied very diligently, more diligently than anyone around her. Even though she wasn't among the very top students in class, she never dared to slack off. He said that before he went to sleep, she was still doing homework. When he woke up, she was still writing. That was the sleepiest hour for everyone, when the entire class was exhausted and desperate to rest. But she didn't sleep. Her eyes were fixed on the exam paper, shining brightly. Ethan Cheen once teased me for being a study fanatic. What did I say back then? I was struggling with a math problem and only replied casually, I don't like studying at all. The young master asked me why someone who didn't like studying would work so hard. The housekeeper said that question reminded him of the phrase, why not eat meat porridge? A phrase that symbolized detachment from reality, ignorance of hardship. For people who couldn't even afford rice. Meat was an unreachable luxury. Later, that phrase became a satire aimed at those in power who failed to understand the suffering of ordinary people. For children from ordinary families, the housekeeper said with a smile, studying is the only path, and the best path. He told me he had explained it that way to Ethan Cheen as well. Then one day, he continued, for the first time, There were textbooks in the young master's school bag when he came home. I asked why. He said you told him to study, that there would be a recitation test the next day. At this point, the housekeeper laughed. The atmosphere grew warm. He told me many old stories about Ethan Chin from before. Then, suddenly, his expression turned serious. Miss Lena, the young master has changed a great deal now. And your contribution is far from small. I've already reported this to the master and madam. In truth, they both know. They also know why he suddenly changed his decision and chose to go against his family's wishes. Defying the chairman's decision, even I could sense that this child truly liked her. But, Lena, in this world, feelings alone are never enough to make things work. I once heard a saying, don't listen to what people say. Listen to what they don't say. What the butler did not say was probably this: Ethan Chin had defied his parents' arrangements because of me, yet in their eyes, such feelings were utterly worthless. My heart sank, but suddenly, I realized something. In my previous life, Ethan only left midway through senior year, so why, in this life, had he been sent away so hastily, right after finishing 11th grade? Something was wrong. I raised my head abruptly. Clutching onto my last shred of hope, I remembered. Ethan once telling me that his parents planned to send him abroad in 12th grade. So why now? Why, when he had only just finished 11th grade? The butler replied, that was indeed the original plan. But we didn't expect the young master to mature so rapidly recently. The chairman noticed this change and decided to push the plan forward. After all, the earlier one studies abroad, the better. The rest of his words faded away. In that instant, my mind went completely blank. My ears buzzed. I was utterly stunned. So it was because of me, Ethan had been forced to leave earlier. If I hadn't tutored him, he wouldn't have become serious about studying so quickly. His grades wouldn't have improved so dramatically. His father wouldn't have taken notice, and the study abroad plan wouldn't have been accelerated. The butterfly effect. It had truly happened. Nothing changed, everything still unfolded the same way, and yet, I had never once regretted it. I am Lena Lo. I have never regretted a single thing I've done. Before meeting Ethan, I didn't care who he was, or what kind of family he came from. But after knowing him, after truly understanding him, I knew he was a very, very good boy. He deserved a brilliant, dazzling life. I wanted him to grow, to become better. I never imagined that this would instead hasten his departure. The butler continued, the madam is very open-minded. After discussing it with the chairman, she proposed letting you study abroad as well. The school has already been selected, Paris. He paused. After seeing the painting you drew, the madam changed the way she looked at you. I suddenly spoke up, but I heard that Ethan isn't studying abroad there. Even if I go, we'd still be separated by thousands of miles. I am no longer 17 or 18 years old. I have already lived through an entire lifetime. I am not a fool. I understood Mrs. Chin's implication perfectly. Looking straight at the butler, I spoke slowly, word by word. Mrs. Chin never changed her mind. Paris or anywhere else. It makes no difference. From beginning to end, all they wanted was to separate Ethan and me. The butler froze for a moment. But still. This is actually good for both of you, Miss Lena. To be honest, the madam's proposal isn't bad at all. You could study further in Paris. With your talent, who knows, no need. Thank you for the kindness, but I won't persuade my parents to move so far away. My parents only have me. To me, fame and prestige are not more important than family. If prestige mattered that much, Why would I have given it up to Dylan's son in my previous life? Whether I go to Paris or not, the one who wins the award will still be the painting moon in the sky, the one I drew. If I leave now, what meaning would that have? What would be the point of being reborn into this life? The butler sighed, and did not continue on this topic. The young master refused as well. He tried every possible way to persuade his father, but the chairman is not someone easily swayed. At first, the young master threatened to jump off the building to force his hand. This infuriated the chairman. They had a huge argument. He was locked up. All sharp objects were confiscated. In the end, the young master went on a hunger strike. No one could persuade him to eat. No wonder he had lost so much weight when he came back. Hearing this, my heart clenched painfully. I asked anxiously, "Then what happened? What happened after that? Was he okay?" As the butler recalled these events, his expression grew heavy. When he looked at me, there was even a hint of reproach in his eyes. That child didn't drink a single drop of water for several days. Before long, he collapsed unconscious. No matter how hard-hearted the chairman was, he was frightened. The madam lost her temper and had a fierce argument with him. In the end, they both had to give in. The butler looked at me and said his final sentence. They agreed to delay the plan by 1 month, and allowed Ethan Sheen to return home once, to say goodbye to you. I clenched the armrest of the sofa tightly. No wonder. I had sat in a daze in front of moon in the sky. For the entire afternoon, at dusk, my phone suddenly rang. It was Ethan. He said only one sentence, "Desk mate, do you want to go on a trip with me?" If I hadn't heard everything the butler told me, I would have thought he was joking, a sudden, impulsive idea. But after knowing everything, all I felt was that he was speaking as if making a final wish. And so, I made the bravest, most decisive decision of my life. "When are we meeting? Where?" Ethan was startled. "In the next few days, any time is fine." "I'm free anytime. Does your uncle agree?" "Then. Now." I wedged the phone between my shoulder and neck, while rummaging through the closet for a suitcase. "Wait for me, Ethan. I'll come find you as soon as I finish packing." After hanging up, I ignored Madam Lee's scolding, and decided to secretly take their suitcase to pack my things. I stubbornly insisted, "I have to go." He once fought for me, so why can't I take a few steps toward him? Madam Lee refused firmly, standing directly in front of the door, blocking my way. It was obvious they wouldn't let me go out. "Dad, Ethan is leaving in just 1 month. And once he leaves, he'll be gone for many years. When he comes back, it might be 7 or 8 years later. I can still go to Tibet many times in the future. I can travel to many other places with you and Mom. But this may be the only chance I have to go with him. And I don't have much time left." Thursday Daitrang suddenly stepped away from the doorway. Without saying a word, he walked into the bedroom. A moment later, he came back out holding a camera. I recognized it immediately, the digital camera he treasured deeply, the one he always kept hidden at the bottom of the wardrobe. Thursday Daitrang rubbed my head gently. "Take some cash with you. It's inconvenient to use outside, and take this card as well. The password is your birthday. I hear Tibet is beautiful. Take lots of photos and bring them back for us to see. When your mother recovers, the 3 of us will go together." Then he turned toward my mother. "Honey, help Lola pack her things." I stood there in a daze, watching the 2 of them discuss what I should bring. My eyes slowly filled with tears. At that moment, I suddenly understood why, in my previous life, after losing them, I no longer wanted to live. I truly, eternally love Thursday Daitrang and Mrs. Lee. An hour later, I smiled brightly at Ethan Sheen, ready to leave any time. Desk mate Ethan. Ethan was still stunned, clearly not fully recovered from the shock. But he tilted his lips into a crooked smile and said, "Let's go." Just as Ethan was about to book the plane tickets, his father called. He said the private jet had already been arranged. That sense of being monitored made me feel suffocated. A trace of gloom flashed across Ethan's face, but he still forced a smile, pretending not to care. After that, a rather large group of us set off for Tibet. Why use the word large? Because aside from the bodyguards Ethan brought with him, when the plane landed at the private airstrip behind the villa, another group of people disembarked as well. Was this how Ethan always lived? At first, it hadn't been this frightening. But because of me, after he confronted his parents, the number of people watching him. End of part 1. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.